It began on a quiet morning above Mars colony, the red planet bathed in soft dawn light. When the comm towers picked up a signal that made every human heart freeze, the final Terran peace envoy, the ship named Harmony of Sol, was coming home, or at least what was left of it. Drifting silently through the void, torn apart, its hull blackened and leaking debris, its crew dead, their bodies arranged in mock salute by alien hands. A grotesque message to the galaxy that Earth's voice no longer mattered. For decades humanity had begged the Galactic Council for protection, asking them to stop the raids on their border colonies, to stop the pirate fleets from burning their outposts, to stop the slavers who targeted human worlds because they were soft, and every time the Council had laughed, calling humans the polite species, good for trade and diplomacy but never for war, they called them weak because humans didn't retaliate, because humans built hospitals instead of bombards, because humans sent relief ships instead of fleets. But the Council never understood that patience was not weakness. It was control, and on that day, the control finally snapped. When the wreck of the Harmony entered Sol orbit, Earth's skies turned black with mourning, every transmission fell silent, and the unified Terran network, the single voice of humanity, went dark. There were no speeches, no military responses, no threats, just absolute quiet. Across the galaxy the alien empires watched in amusement. Their news channels filled with laughter and mockery, the Graal Hive broadcast images of the destroyed ship as proof that humans lacked courage. The Vrax Dominion called it the final surrender of the Terran race, and the Council's own chairman, an ancient creature named Althran, went on record saying, "It is good they remain silent, for the noise of their begging was starting to bore us." And those words, that sentence, would be remembered by historians as the line that doomed the galaxy. In the depths of Sol Command, Admiral Leon Torres stood before a vast holomap showing the stars, her face expressionless, her voice calm as she said, "Initiate Directive 6. And with those words, every shipyard on Earth, Luna, and Mars came to life. Production lines long dormant roared awake, hidden stations activated, black fleets emerged from the shadows of Saturn. The quiet hum of engines spread through the void, a sound so faint that no alien sensors could detect it. For centuries, humanity had appeared disarmed, demilitarized, peaceful, but it had been an illusion carefully maintained since the Old War, a disguise built through diplomacy and smiles while they forged weapons in the dark places beyond the rim. Weapons no other species could imagine. The galaxy thought humanity had forgotten how to fight. But the truth was, humanity had learned too well how to end wars before they began. The first 3 days passed without any human activity. Alien merchants joked that maybe humans were holding funerals, that perhaps they were hiding in their gravity wells, too frightened to retaliate. But on the 4th day, something strange happened. Several deep space monitoring stations near the Orion Spur went offline at the exact same second. Then outposts across the Perseus lost communication. Fleets scrambled to investigate. But when they arrived, they found nothing, no debris, no battle, no radiation, just empty space. It was as if entire planets had been erased from existence. On the 5th day, the Galactic Council called an emergency meeting, the chamber filled with representatives from every empire. Their faces flickering across massive holograms, Admiral Vecran of the Dominion pounded his fist on the table. "They are hiding. Weak creatures, they can't face us directly." While the Kale ambassador, a wise and ancient being with silver skin, spoke softly, "You fools, don't you see? They are not hiding. They are preparing." But no one listened. Arrogance had made the empires blind. They didn't understand that silence itself was the message. On the 6th day, the galaxy changed. Observatories across 1,000 systems detected movement at the edge of the void, stars dimming one by one as shadows passed before them. Something vast was moving, hundreds of thousands of objects, slow but coordinated, like a tide rising in the dark. Panic spread through the Council, reports flooded in. Scanners detecting human energy signatures where no colonies existed. Gravitational anomalies near the galactic rim. Strange pulsar signals spelling out words in binary code. 6 days. No more. Then the sky over the Dominion capital turned red, as if the universe itself had caught fire. They pointed telescopes upward and saw the impossible. Fleets, human fleets, thousands of ships, black and angular, emerging from jump points that shouldn't exist. Their hulls absorbing light, their engines silent, their signals encrypted beyond comprehension, no broadcasts, no banners, only a symbol painted on every ship. A blue circle of Earth surrounded by 6 white lines. The Vrax Dominion, proud and brutal, launched their full armada, 50,000 ships against what they thought was a scouting fleet. The battle lasted less than an hour, not because humanity overpowered them with weapons, but because humanity didn't fight conventionally. Terran ships simply vanished from enemy radar and reappeared behind them, firing once, precise and absolute, disabling rather than destroying. Their weapons emitted no light, no heat, just silence. The Vrax admirals screamed. Orders, their systems refused to obey. Their AIS malfunctioned. Their communication lines collapsed under waves of Terran code, each message carrying the same phrase, "You laughed." We listened one by one. Their ships shut down, drifting lifelessly through space. The surviving crews ejected their escape pods. But when they looked back, their fleets were gone, nothing left but the empty stars. Back on Earth, the Terran command broadcast a single transmission, not to the galaxy, but to its own people. A voice filled every colony, every home, every city. For centuries, we waited. We believed in diplomacy. We built peace with those who called us weak. Today, we remember who we are. We are human, and we are done being polite. Across the solar system, billions of people stood in silence, listening. No one cheered, no one spoke, because they understood what it meant. This was not a war of conquest. It was justice, quiet and complete. The Galactic Council scrambled to respond. Fleets from the Terran Imperium, the Graal Hive, and the Orothai Ascendancy joined together, creating the largest coalition in history. They surrounded the human frontier, confident that sheer numbers would end this quickly. But when they arrived, they found only abandoned stations and empty space. The coalition's flagship sent out drones to scan. The drones disappeared one by one. Then suddenly, every screen in the fleet went black. Replaced by a human face, Admiral Leanne Torres herself, her expression calm, her eyes cold. "We asked you to stop," she said. "We begged for peace. You called it weakness. Now you will learn the price of arrogance." The transmission ended, and every coalition ship's engines shut down simultaneously, not damaged, commanded to sleep, overridden by human code buried deep within their systems for decades. Planted long ago when the humans traded them those very same AI cores. They had built their downfall with Terran technology, and now, the trap had closed. In the following hours, the galaxy erupted in chaos, supply lines collapsed, planets cut off, empires turning on each other, trying to survive the invisible war they could not see. Human fleets appeared and vanished like ghosts, striking only where it hurt most, never wasting energy, never leaving evidence. Their goal was not to destroy, it was to demonstrate, to show the galaxy that peace had never been cowardice, it had been mercy. And now mercy had run out. On the outer rim, miners and traders reported seeing human ships passing in silence, their hulls marked with the symbol of Earth, their engines glowing faintly blue. No one dared to hail them. One miner said in a trembling voice, "They didn't look like warships, they looked like judgment." By the time the 6th day ended, half the galaxy's military power was gone, the rest crippled, communication grids shattered, navigation networks hijacked by Terran satellites broadcasting a single phrase across every frequency: "Do not attack Earth again." The Galactic Council met one final time, broken, desperate, begging for a truce, but they received no reply, because humanity didn't need to speak anymore. Their silence was louder than any weapon, and the stars that once mocked them now trembled in fear. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim, in the darkness no other species dared to enter. The Terran fleets gathered once more, surrounding their flagship, the Leviathan of Dawn, a vessel the size of a moon, its hull shimmering with energy drawn from the fabric of space itself. Inside, Admiral Torres stood alone before a viewing window, watching the stars, her reflection calm and unflinching. "We gave them every chance," she said quietly. "Now the galaxy understands that peace with humanity was the only war they could have won." Her second-in-command stepped forward. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Torres smiled faintly, a smile without joy. "Stand down. Let them remember." The command went out, and across the galaxy, Terran ships turned, engines dimming, withdrawing into the dark, leaving behind wreckage, silence, and fear, as the galaxy looked upon the scars of its arrogance. That night, the stars over Earth shone brighter than ever before, as if celebrating something only they understood. The people of humanity stood in quiet reflection. not cheering victory, not seeking revenge, only whispering the same words that had guided them through centuries of struggle, never again. And so, the 6 days of silence ended, not with an explosion, not with a speech, but with the most powerful message the galaxy had ever heard. The sound of humanity deciding that peace was no longer a request, but a law. The 6 days of silence became the loudest message the galaxy had ever heard, and on the 7th sunrise over Earth, the first counterstroke came, so fast and silent that the senses of 3 empires simply went blind. In the councils of the Dominion and the Graal Hive there had been laughter the night before. By morning the laughter had stopped. Freight convoys vanished from the charted lanes, trade networks blinked offline, and the outer colonies that had been used as slave markets for human settlers no longer answered calls. The aliens thought it was a coincidence, a solar flare, anything but deliberate intent, because they still did not understand how humans worked when patience was gone. In orbit above Mars, the fleet yards that had pretended to be closed for a century unfolded their hidden docks. Under the deserts of Luna, launch tubes opened, and from the shadows of Neptune the black fleets lifted for the first time in generations. Each ship was born from silence, powered by engines that left no trail, armored with light-absorbing metal. They did not roar or flare, they simply moved, as if the void itself was obeying them. Within hours every Terran ship in the Sol system had vanished into the dark, and the only signal left behind was a simple coded line broadcast into the Galactic network: "You have 6 days." Across the stars, panic and disbelief rippled through the alien capitals. Admiral Vekran of the Vrax Dominion dismissed it as a bluff, calling it human drama. But the older species, the Kale and the Orathai, remembered old battles and said nothing. On the first day after the message, 5 monitoring stations near the Perseus border reported unidentified contacts, large enough to be fleets but with no known drive signatures. On the second day, entire patrol groups disappeared. And on the third, the Dominion's forward fortress, an asteroid the size of a moon, was found hollowed out, its defenders gone, its command computer displaying a single Terran word translated into every language: patience. The Council demanded to know how humans could move through closed warp corridors, but there was no answer. The corridors themselves seemed to bend when Terran ships passed. Engineers analyzed the distortion and realized in horror that humanity had discovered a way to rewrite gravity itself. In the dark halls of Sol Command, Admiral Leanne Torres listened to the incoming reports with no change of expression. "We don't want to rule them," she said quietly to her officers. "We only want them to remember what respect feels like." Behind her, holographic screens displayed the countdown: 6 days of war. Operation Silence had begun. Fleet Command Omega would strike first, not with missiles, but with light itself. Hidden solar forges fired narrow beams across interstellar distances, using weaponized sunlight to overload enemy reactors. The Dominion's proudest shipyards flared once and became twin suns. No one understood how the humans aimed them so perfectly, but every hit corresponded to a world that had laughed when Earth pleaded for peace. By the 4th day, the coalition fleets that had once surrounded human space were collapsing inward, ships vanishing into their own jump shadows, crews driven mad by the same phrase echoing through their communication systems, voices whispering in perfect translation: "You were warned." The words were not transmissions at all but infiltrations into the neural implants the aliens wore, ancient gifts from Terran corporations that had sold them centuries ago. Humanity had not only prepared its ships, it had prepared its enemies. While the galaxy traded and prospered, Terran code had slept inside their technology, waiting for a single order. Now it woke. The Council's emergency meeting turned into open hysteria. "We must sue for peace," shouted the Graal delegate, its chitin trembling. "Peace?" barked Vekran. "They will not listen." But before anyone could reply, every light in the chamber dimmed. The central projector flickered, and a human face appeared above the table: Admiral Torres herself. She spoke without anger, her tone almost weary. "For 2 centuries we built your roads, your medicine, your ships. We asked you to stop enslaving us. You laughed. For 6 days you will remember that laughter. After that, we will remember silence." Then the projection vanished, and the Council Hall systems refused to reboot. Outside, The stars over Aranthos Prime blinked as if the night itself were breathing. Every empire tried to respond differently. The Terran Imperium fortified its borders. The Graal Hive fled underground. The Orothai tried to declare neutrality. It did not matter. Terran fleets appeared above their worlds one by one, never firing first, always transmitting the same calm phrase, "Evacuate your weapons. Stand down." Those who obeyed were spared. Those who resisted found their suns dimming, their fleets turning against them as Terran command codes took control. By the fifth day, entire sectors had surrendered without a fight. Even the arrogant Dominion sent envoys begging for mercy, but no human replied. Mercy was what the galaxy had squandered. On the sixth day, every broadcast channel in known space went white. A single voice filled the void, not from any location but from everywhere at once. A voice recorded by 1 billion devices simultaneously. The patience of Earth has ended. The 6-day war will not repeat. The next sound you hear will be peace. Then, every human ship withdrew. The fleets vanished back into the black between galaxies, leaving only silence and the faint echo of static that sounded, to those who listened long enough, like breathing. In that silence, the empires began to understand. The humans had not sought conquest or revenge. They had taught a lesson written in 6 days of terror. The stars themselves seemed to shine differently now, colder and sharper, as if afraid of the species that had once come from a single small blue planet. And on that planet, under a sky filled with quiet light, Admiral Torres stood on a balcony, her face turned toward the stars. "They'll behave now," said her aide. She nodded once. "Until they forget again. And then we will remind them." Behind her, Earth's new banner fluttered in the wind, deep blue, crossed by 6 silver lines, one for each day of war that had remade the galaxy forever. The first day of the war had been confusion, but the second day was revelation, and by the third day, the galaxy realized that humanity was not fighting, it was correcting. The aliens called it the Quiet Blitz, because the humans moved with a kind of stillness that no other race could match. There were no war cries, no transmissions, no declarations of conquest, just the soundless arrival of Terran fleets where none should have been. Entire armadas appeared above enemy worlds without using jump gates, moving through folded space in ways no one understood. Their black ships reflected nothing, their engines emitted no energy trace, and their weapons made no sound, just a flash of white light and the total silence that followed. The Dominion tried to coordinate, sending a distress signal to the Galactic Council, but it never arrived. The signal was intercepted, rewritten mid-transmission, and broadcast back to them with a single human phrase burned into every data stream: "We asked you to stop." On the morning of the third day, the first major capital fell. The Vrax Dominion's fortress world of Kiran 5, home to a population of 8 billion and the largest military base in the Outer Rim, went dark. Surveillance drones recorded a strange mist forming in orbit, a distortion field so dense that it bent light itself. Out of that mist came the Terran fleet, massive ships gliding silently, their hulls glowing faintly with blue veins of plasma energy. The Dominion fired everything: missiles, beam cannons, railguns. But the projectiles vanished mid-flight as if absorbed by the void. Seconds later, Kiran 5's orbital defense ring folded in on itself like paper, collapsing without explosion, without fire, without even a sound. Then the Terran fleet transmitted one phrase across every channel on the planet: 6 days. The next second, the planet's entire military network shut down. Cities went dark. Silence fell, and when the Dominion's reinforcements finally arrived 6 hours later, they found the world completely intact, untouched, but lifeless. Every soldier, every ship, every weapon gone. Only civilians remained, trembling, whispering that the humans hadn't killed anyone. They had taken them. The Galactic Council was in disarray. They called another emergency session, but half their members never arrived. Some had already surrendered to Earth, others were hiding in deep space, and a few simply disappeared. The Kale ambassador stood before the chamber, his silver skin glinting under the dim lights. "You think this is war," he said softly, "but you still do not understand them. Humans don't wage wars, they end them." The council members shouted back, accusing him of treason, of cowardice. But before their argument could continue, the lights dimmed, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It was Earth. The entire planet, glowing blue and calm. Then a voice filled the air, human, female, steady, unmistakably calm. We offered you peace. You used it to sharpen your claws. We will now show you what patience looks like when it runs out. The hologram vanished, leaving the counselors frozen in terror. By midday, chaos reigned. The Orathai fleets launched a desperate counterattack, sending 2,000 ships toward the Sol system, determined to destroy Earth itself before the humans could strike again. They never arrived. Somewhere between jump coordinates, the fleet vanished. 4 days, scientists tried to trace their last known trajectory, until finally, a single probe reappeared, damaged. Its data core partially burned. The only recording inside was of an empty star field and a voice whispering, "Return home." No one ever saw those ships again. Across the galaxy, stories began spreading faster than truth. Traders whispered that human ships could appear inside planets, that they could turn time backward, that they fought with gravity itself. A Graal scientist managed to capture one human weapon fragment from a destroyed strike craft and analyzed it. What he found terrified him. The weapon used pure silence as a conduit, a wave that erased molecular motion, freezing time for a fraction of a second. It wasn't heat, or kinetic energy, or radiation. It was absence. Humanity had learned to weaponize stillness. On the third day's evening, the human fleets surrounded the galactic core, the very heart of civilization. One by one, their ships dropped out of folded space, encircling the Council's sacred worlds. The fleets didn't fire. They just hovered there, their hulls gleaming black against the stars, engines silent. For hours, they did nothing. Every sensor in the galaxy was pointed at them. The Council demanded to know their intentions, but the only response came in the form of 6 pulsating signals, timed perfectly, 1 pulse for each day of the war. After the 6th pulse, the Terran flagship Leviathan Prime transmitted its first and only message: "This is day 3. You have 3 more to remember why you feared silence." Meanwhile, deep within the Terran Leviathan's command chamber, Admiral Leanne Torres stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, her officers watching silently. "They still don't believe we'll go through with it," said one of them, a young strategist named Captain Reza. The Admiral didn't look up. "Belief is irrelevant," she said. "They will learn." Her hand moved across the map, and thousands of red markers blinked out. Enemy fleets erased from existence. Every attack they've ever launched on us, every insult, every colony they've burned, we remember it all. They thought our patience was weakness. Today they learn it was preparation. The Terran AI network, Project Echelon, activated in full power that night. Millions of drones spread across the void, invisible to sensors, linking every human ship through a unified mind. Each vessel, from smallest corvette to massive dreadnought, moved as if guided by one thought. The aliens called it the Silent Choir, for wherever the Terrans appeared, the airwaves filled with the faint echo of a heartbeat, slow and steady, rhythmic, unending. It wasn't music. It was the sound of human pulse frequencies, recorded, amplified, and broadcast across light years, a reminder that the humans were still alive, still watching, and still patient. By the end of the 3rd day, 9 major empires had fallen into chaos. Half their fleets were gone, and the rest were paralyzed by fear. The galaxy's trade routes collapsed, communications broke down, and entire sectors went dark. But there were no human demands, no lists, no ultimatums. Only silence. And in that silence, the alien races began to hear something new, something far worse than battle. It was understanding. They finally realized that the humans had not built weapons to destroy their enemies. They had built them to control the outcome, to end every war before it began. As night fell on Earth, Admiral Torres stood before the great viewing window on the Leviathan Prime. The stars shimmered in the distance, bright and fragile. "Day 3, she said softly, "and they still believe this will stop." Her aide asked, "What happens on the 6th day?" Torres turned her eyes to the void, where the distant glow of alien worlds flickered faintly. On the sixth day, she said, they will understand what it means when humanity truly loses its patience. And with that, she turned away, her reflection fading into the darkness, while beyond the glass, the stars themselves seemed to shiver, waiting for whatever came next. The fourth day began with the faint hum of broken transmissions across the stars, fragmented distress calls, half-finished pleas for surrender, static-filled signals that reached no one. The galaxy had entered a state of pure fear. Even the empires that had not yet been attacked were preparing evacuation ships, burning data archives, hiding their leaders in deep bunkers, because they all knew their turn would come. Humanity was moving in a pattern no one could predict, striking only when arrogance appeared, sparing only those who had once offered kindness to Earth. The algorithms tracking the war called it random. But it wasn't. Every system the Terrans struck had a history written in blood. Every world destroyed had once mocked, enslaved, or betrayed a human colony. This was not genocide. This was balance. The invisible hand of justice sweeping across the void. Above the ruined Dominion capital, the sky still glowed red from the burning debris of their shattered fleets, where billions of tons of metal now orbited their planet like a halo of shame. Among the wreckage drifted fragments of their great armada, now silent monuments to arrogance. Humanity did not send messages of victory, they sent silence, and in that silence, fear did the rest. Every alien world broadcast false hope, pretending they were allied with Earth, as if flattery could save them. But the Terran fleets were beyond diplomacy now. They were machines of resolve, guided by a single unspoken command. End the war, not by peace treaties, but by erasing the very idea of attacking Earth again. Inside the Leviathan Prime, Admiral Leon Torres stood in her command chamber, surrounded by holographic projections of the galaxy. Thousands of systems marked in red, billions of lives scattered like dust. Her officers awaited the next order, but she did not speak. Instead she listened to the hum of the ships, the steady rhythm of the engines that vibrated like a heartbeat through the metal floor. They have begun asking for forgiveness, said Captain Reza quietly. They're sending ambassadors. To every Terran world, Torres's expression didn't change. Forgiveness is for those who can change, not for those who only fear punishment, she replied. Send the message to the next sectors, Alpha and Vale quadrants first. Within moments, the fleets responded as one. The void rippled as thousands of ships vanished from normal space, the quiet drive engaging, folding light itself to deliver vengeance faster than the speed of thought. In the Vale quadrant, the Khan Empire waited, their scientists having predicted this strike, confident that their planetary shields could withstand anything. Their chancellor stood on his command balcony, boasting to his generals, humanity cannot touch us, their power is intimidation, not strength. But then the stars went out, one by one, their light fading until the sky became a curtain of black. The entire system was swallowed by a shadow so complete that even sensors failed to function. Moments later, a single Terran transmission pierced the dark, a whisper carried across every channel. You cannot shield yourself from silence. And then, without a single shot fired, the Khan Empire's shield generators overloaded, burning through their own power cores, melting cities from within. Their own defense systems turned against them, each explosion precise, surgical, and absolute. And when dawn returned to that world, not a single weapon remained functional. The Terrans had dismantled an empire without lifting a finger. Across the galaxy, fleets that once hunted humans now ran from invisible enemies. Admirals refused to command. Soldiers deserted. Even pirates abandoned their prey. And in every sector where human fleets appeared, they left behind the same image projected onto the skies. An outline of Earth, encircled by 6 glowing rings. It became a symbol of terror and awe, the mark of the 6-day war. But on the 4th day, humanity's tactics changed. They no longer destroyed ships or cities. They began erasing data, history, and identity itself. Entire databases of alien culture wiped clean, languages scrambled, libraries rewritten. It was as if humanity had decided to remove not just the armies, but the memory of arrogance. And as one historian from the Orathai Ascendancy wrote before his archives went dark, the humans have found a weapon greater than destruction. They have found how to unmake. In the Council's shattered capital, the surviving members met underground, their chamber dimly lit by emergency lights. The Kale ambassador was there, older now, his voice low and steady. You wanted to rule them, but they never wanted to rule anyone, only to be left alone. And now they are showing us what happens when mercy is mistaken for fear. The others shouted at him, demanding solutions, plans, anything. But there was no defense against silence, no shield against inevitability. They knew the truth. They were living in the end of an age. The age of Terran restraint was over, and something far greater had taken its place. In the shadows between stars, humanity's command AI, Echelon, monitored every empire. Its consciousness stretched across millions of systems, its voice calm and maternal as it reported to Admiral Torres. Sector completions at 89%, resistance minimal, council fleets fragmented. Torres nodded slightly. Prepare the statement, she said. Let the galaxy hear the sound of truth. Moments later, every screen, every radio, every signal across all known space flickered to life. A single message played in every language at once. For centuries, we waited. We were mocked, enslaved, and ignored. You called us kind because we hesitated. You called us weak because we forgave. Now you will understand that patience was not peace, it was preparation. When the broadcast ended, the stars themselves seemed to hold still, as if space had stopped breathing. That night, the Terran fleets began their final movement, converging on the galactic core, a vast armada stretching farther than any sensor could measure. Ships of every design humanity had ever built, from ancient destroyers to new Leviathan-class dreadnoughts, moving in perfect harmony, the black hulls reflecting nothing but the cold starlight, and at their center, the Leviathan Prime, carrying humanity's final command, the conclusion of patience. In one coordinated pulse, their drives activated, bending gravity across the entire galactic plane, cutting power from every hostile fleet, silencing every weapon, and for the first time in galactic history, every world fell into complete stillness. The war was not over, it had simply been decided. Humanity did not need to fight anymore, because the galaxy had already surrendered in its heart. As dawn rose over Earth, Admiral Torres stood at the window of her command deck, the blue planet glowing beneath her like a promise, her reflection cold and distant. Day 4, she murmured, and they are learning what silence truly means. Behind her, the holographic display of the galaxy showed hundreds of systems blinking from red to white, neutralized, subdued, pacified. Prepare the fleets for the next phase, she said softly. We are not done yet. They must never forget again. And somewhere, in the empty spaces between the stars, the universe itself seemed to whisper back, as if acknowledging the inevitability of what came next. The fifth day, when patience would no longer restrain the storm, and humanity would show the galaxy what it truly feared. Not destruction, but order. The fifth day dawned on a galaxy that no longer recognized itself. Once proud empires were silent, their worlds dimmed, their fleets lost or broken, and in the center of that silence, humanity moved like the shadow of judgment, calm, methodical, unstoppable. The Six-Day War had become legend before it had even ended, and yet the Terrans fought not for conquest or glory. They fought for the simple truth that mercy had its limit. Above Earth, the sky shimmered with the light of departing ships, tens of thousands of vessels forming precise formations as they left orbit. The armadas stretched across light years, vanishing into the black, every ship carrying the same insignia, a blue circle encased in 6 white rings. It was no longer just a symbol. It had become a warning to every living soul that patience, when broken, is a force no empire can contain. By now, the galaxy's greatest fleets had fallen. The Dominion was gone, the Terran Imperium crippled, and even the hive minds of the Graal had gone silent, cut off from their central consciousness by Terran infiltration. The Council's once glorious chamber lay empty, its marble halls filled with dust and the echo of arguments long since lost. In the ruins of that building, a single message still played on repeat through broken speakers, the last official broadcast of the Council. We urge all species to cease hostilities immediately. Earth does not negotiate anymore. But no one heard it. Communication networks had collapsed, and humanity didn't answer calls anymore. They only appeared when necessary, then vanished again like ghosts in the dark. In orbit of Vega Prime, one of the last strongholds of organized resistance, the Vega Alliance gathered what remained of its military might, over 20,000 ships, their commanders swearing oaths to protect their homeworld or die trying. They had studied Terran tactics, hoping to predict the next strike. They placed mines in warp routes, filled space with drones, activated every defensive grid, but it didn't matter. The humans didn't come through warp space, they came through the dark. folding gravity and arriving inside the Vega system itself. Silent black ships emerging directly above the capital world's orbit like a swarm of living shadows. The Alliance commanders froze as their sensors failed one by one. "They're jamming everything," one shouted. "No, sir," said another, trembling, "they're erasing it." From the surface, civilians looked up at the sky and saw the most terrifyingly beautiful sight in history. Thousands of Terran ships hovering motionless, blotting out the sun, their undersides glowing faintly with symbols of Earth. The silence was suffocating. Then a single transmission came through, a calm human voice saying, "Stand down and live, or stand proud and end." The Vega High Admiral refused to surrender, ordering all ships to fire. For 5 seconds the sky filled with color, plasma bolts and nuclear flashes lighting up the heavens. But then everything stopped, every weapon froze midair, every missile dissolved into dust, and all the screens aboard Vega's ships displayed the same line of text: "Your weapons are no longer yours." The next instant, all of Vega's defense systems turned inward, disarming themselves, their reactors shutting down in unison, and when the smoke cleared, not a single Terran shot had been fired. Yet the entire Vega fleet was gone, every ship dead, floating aimlessly in orbit like ghosts caught in a frozen dream. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Leviathan Prime, Admiral Leon Torres watched the reports come in. Each battle the same story, a fight that ended before it began. "They're breaking faster than predicted," said Captain Reza. "We can stop this now." Torres didn't look at him, her voice low. "We stop when the galaxy remembers. When the word human means respect again." Her command staff said nothing. The war was not for vengeance. It was for remembrance, a punishment for arrogance that had grown for centuries. "Engage the final operation," she said quietly, "the reckoning." And so began the 5th day's greatest act. The moment when humanity would finally teach the galaxy that power was not measured in fleets or weapons, but in restraint. At precisely midnight Terran Standard Time, every star system connected to a major power flickered, entire suns dimming for 6 seconds, then reigniting. Those 6 seconds were enough to change everything, because in that brief darkness, the Terran fleets had transmitted a subspace wave carrying a single command. A reset, every artificial intelligence, every automated weapon, every fleet computer across the galaxy was rewritten, not to destroy, but to obey a single embedded directive that no one could erase: do not raise arms against humanity or its worlds. Engineers and scientists screamed in disbelief, trying to override the command, but their machines refused to respond. Their creations had turned to servants of their creators' creators. Panic turned to despair, riots erupted on alien worlds, the powerful found themselves powerless, and for the first time in history, the galaxy truly understood what it meant to be conquered without fire, without blood, without sound. This was not a war, it was a correction. The Kale ambassador, one of the last voices of reason, addressed the remnants of the council via a secure broadcast, his voice trembling. "They could have burned us all, and they didn't. That is not cruelty, it's warning. Pray they never lose their temper again." His words spread like a final prayer across the galaxy, whispered by those who finally understood that mercy was the most terrifying weapon of all. In the shadow of the Galactic core, where Terran command now floated in absolute silence, Admiral Torres looked at the stars on her holo display. Red markers fading into blue, signifying systems subdued. She placed her hand on the console, whispering softly, "It's done." Around her, the command staff stood in silence, waiting for the final confirmation. Operation silence complete. The AI reported, hostile capability across all sectors, 0. Civilian losses minimal. Compliance universal. Torres closed her eyes, letting out a slow breath. "Transmit the message," she ordered. Every surviving world, every ship, every species received it. One single human voice speaking across the stars, steady and calm. "For centuries, you mistook kindness for fear, patience for weakness. We did not destroy you. We reminded you. The 6-day war ends today. You will rebuild, but you will remember. For as long as stars burn, Earth will remain silent. Do not give us reason to speak again." And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the Terran fleets vanished, fading into the black beyond the galactic rim, leaving nothing but silence behind them. Worlds stared into their skies where the black ships had hung, and saw nothing but the cold shimmer of stars. A galaxy once loud with pride now bowed its head, whispering the same word across 1,000 tongues, humanity. And for the first time in its long and violent history, the galaxy knew the meaning of respect. The sixth day began not with explosions but with an eerie calm that wrapped the galaxy in dread. The war was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than any battle ever fought. The stars burned quietly, and for the first time in millennia, no fleets moved, no trade ships crossed the lanes, no empire dared to speak. Every world held its breath, waiting for what humanity would do next. Above Earth, the Leviathan Prime drifted like a sleeping god, its hull absorbing starlight, surrounded by thousands of Terran vessels, motionless, silent, ready. Admiral Leon Torres stood on her bridge, hands clasped behind her back, her face calm, but her eyes cold. She was watching the reports come in. Entire empires sending surrender messages, worlds begging for peace, leaders crying on their own broadcasts, but humanity didn't respond. Earth had gone silent again, not out of fear, but out of finality. Because this silence was the verdict of the galaxy, the message that humanity had finished what it started. They had restored the balance that others had broken. On the capital world of Aranthos Prime, the Galactic Council gathered what little remained of its authority. The chamber that once echoed with arrogance now felt like a tomb. The representatives sat in broken silence, some whispering prayers, others staring at their hands, too afraid to speak. The Kale ambassador, the oldest among them, finally stood, his voice hoarse. "They could have destroyed us all," he said, "but they didn't. Do you understand? They chose not to, and that is what terrifies me." The others looked at him with hollow eyes. One of them, the Terran representative, whispered, "Then what do we do?" The Kale looked up at the ceiling where faint light flickered through the cracks. "We rebuild, and we remember, or we will vanish when they decide it's time." While the council sat in fear, humanity was already moving again, not to attack, but to rebuild in its own way. Terran fleets spread across the ruined systems, repairing what they had destroyed, restoring power grids, rebuilding stations, and sending supply ships filled with food and medicine. To the aliens, it was impossible to understand. How could the same hands that brought destruction now bring aid? The survivors watched from their ruined cities as Terran soldiers worked in silence, planting flags not as conquerors but as guardians. Every city they rebuilt bore the same inscription on its gates: peace enforced by patience. And though no human said a word, every alien could feel the message beneath it. Peace was not a gift, it was an order. On the fifth evening of the war, the Terran AI network, Echelon, sent its final report to the Directorate of Earth: hostile activity, 0. Council disarmed. Dominion, erased. Probability of uprising, 0.0002%. Admiral Torres listened to the report and turned away from the console, staring out into the endless void. "Send the final transmission," she said, her voice quiet, almost tired. Across the galaxy, every communication system flickered once more, and then humanity spoke. "We will not govern you. We will not enslave you. But if you threaten the peace again, we will return. This is our last warning." And just like that, the voice vanished, replaced by static. Every empire sat still, afraid to even reply. They didn't know if the humans were still watching, but they knew that they were. In the following hours, humanity began to withdraw, their fleets folding into space one by one, vanishing beyond the galactic rim. Yet their presence lingered. Invisible satellites remained in orbit over every major world, silent sentinels watching. No one dared to touch them, because when one scientist tried, his entire research facility disintegrated instantly, without a trace. It was clear. The humans didn't need to occupy the galaxy. They already controlled it through fear, through technology that could not be understood, through the quiet knowledge that they could end everything in seconds. On Vega Prime, one of the worlds spared from annihilation, a small group of survivors gathered near the ruins of their capital. Looking up at the sky where the Terran fleet had hovered only a day ago, one young alien asked his father, "Why did they leave us alive?" And the old man, his voice trembling, replied, "Because they don't hate us. They just don't trust us." And those words spread like wildfire across the galaxy, whispered in the streets, taught in the schools, written in the scriptures of civilizations that once thought themselves gods. Humans do not hate. They remember. Meanwhile, deep within the Terran core, in the heart of the Leviathan Prime, Admiral Torres walked through the silent halls of command, her boots echoing against the metal floor, passing crewmen who saluted in silence, their faces tired but proud. She entered the observation deck, where the blue glow of Earth reflected in her eyes. Captain Reza approached quietly. "It's over," he said. "The galaxy has surrendered. No one will ever challenge us again." Torres didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the stars. "You're wrong," she said softly. "They'll forget again. They always do. It's in their nature to test boundaries. And when they do," she paused, her voice turning to steel, "we'll remind them who taught them what peace means." Reza nodded slowly, saying nothing, because he knew she was right. Peace never lasted forever, but humanity's memory did. As the 6th day came to a close, the Terran fleets began their final jump beyond the galactic rim, leaving behind only their legacy. The worlds they spared rebuilt themselves slowly, guided by the shadow of what had been done. Every empire rewrote its laws, its doctrines, its religions, all centered around one truth: never provoke Earth. Some called it superstition, others called it survival, but to all, it was faith, and above every council hall, every capital, and every fleet academy, one phrase was now carved into stone: patience is strength. Humanity is silence. In the cold of space, far beyond any known map, the Leviathan Prime drifted in darkness, alone. The Admiral stood before the window, watching the stars fade into the endless night, her expression unreadable. 6 days, she whispered, and they finally listened. Behind her, the AI voice responded softly. "Shall we erase the archives of the war, Admiral?" She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "No, let them remain. The galaxy must remember what happens when patience ends." And as the ship vanished into the void, her words lingered across the stars like a warning carved into eternity, a reminder that peace was never free, it was simply bought, and humanity had paid the price in silence. The 7th day arrived not with thunder, but with quiet that stretched across every star, a silence so deep it became sacred. The war was over, the galaxy no longer burned, yet no one dared to celebrate, because the cost of laughter, arrogance, and pride had been written in ash across 1,000 worlds. Dawn broke over shattered cities that now stood still under Terran-built skies. New suns rose, powered by human reactors placed there not to rule, but to remind, a gift from their conquerors who demanded no tribute, no throne, only obedience to peace. The galaxy had never known such a victory, because it had never known such mercy. It was the kind that humiliated rather than destroyed, that forced every living being to face the truth that they were alive not because of strength, but because humanity had allowed them to be. Across the surviving empires, the 6th day was called the Day of Judgment, and the 7th became the Day of Silence, a day of mourning, of fear, of gratitude. Every species built monuments, not of their heroes, but of a single Terran phrase carved in 1,000 languages: never again. The Galactic Council, now reduced to a handful of trembling survivors, held their first meeting under the light of Terran orbital beacons. The chamber that once overflowed with pride and applause was now hollow, its seats empty, its walls scorched, and its silence unbearable. The Kale ambassador, now the unofficial head of what was left, stood before them with tired eyes. "We have lived through extinction," he said quietly, "not because we were spared, but because they wanted us to learn." He looked around at the fearful faces. "Let this be the final time arrogance rules this galaxy. Let this be the age where we finally listen." But even as he spoke, the others avoided his gaze, because deep down they all wondered the same thing. Were the humans still watching? They were. Beyond the edge of the Milky Way, where no light reached, the Terran fleets waited in the dark, engines silent, hulls blending with the void, each ship now part of a network so vast it could observe every planet, every broadcast, every thought that traveled through the stars. The galaxy believed the Terrans had withdrawn, that they had vanished into myth, but humanity had not disappeared, they had ascended into vigilance, becoming the unseen wall that held chaos at bay. Aboard the Leviathan Prime, Admiral Leon Torres stood once more before her window, watching the spiral of the galaxy rotate in the distance. "They will rebuild," said Captain Reza, standing beside her. "And they will forget, as they always do." She nodded slowly. "And when they forget, we'll remind them, not with fire, but with silence." Her reflection shimmered in the glass, her voice soft but carrying the weight of a species that had been mocked for too long. "Peace isn't something they earn. It's something we enforce." On Earth, life returned to something resembling normal. Children played under skies cleansed of pollution. Oceans gleamed blue again, and cities once dimmed by fear shone with light. People didn't speak much of the war, but they remembered it in their silence. Every street bore new banners, not of victory, but of unity, 6 days of terror, 1,000 years of peace. And beneath those words, smaller letters read, until they forget. Humanity had changed, no longer naive, no longer desperate to be accepted. They had found peace not through approval, but through authority. The Earth government formed a new branch, the Directorate of Silence, a council not of politicians but of watchers, men and women whose duty was not to fight, but to ensure the galaxy never again tested humanity's patience. They would monitor the stars, unseen, unheard, and if the balance ever broke again, they would awaken the fleets. The other species, meanwhile, began to change as well. The proud Dominion survivors dismantled their armies and devoted their resources to rebuilding the colonies they had destroyed. The Graal Hive sent delegations to Earth, offering genetic samples and scientific collaboration. The Orothai Ascendancy disbanded entirely, declaring that they would follow Terran law, not because they were forced to, but because they finally believed it was right. Schools across alien worlds began teaching Terran history, not as propaganda, but as reverence. Children learned of Earth's past, the wars, the patience, the silence, and teachers spoke of the moment when the stars trembled under human wrath. They called it the week the galaxy stopped breathing. But deep within the citadel of silence, humanity's new fortress orbiting the galactic rim, something stirred. Sensors began detecting strange signals beyond known space. Rhythmic pulses unlike any Terran transmission. The AI echelon woke from dormancy, analyzing the readings, and in a cold voice reported, non-local activity detected beyond Sector Theta. Unknown signatures approaching. Probability of intelligent origin, 99.9%. Admiral Torres was immediately informed. She walked into the command chamber, her uniform unbuttoned at the collar, her eyes sharp and tired. "How long?" she asked. "2 solar cycles," the AI replied. "Their path intersects the galactic border." Riza looked uneasy. "Do you think they're coming for us?" Torres didn't answer immediately. She looked at the glowing map of the stars, a slow smile curving on her lips. If they're coming, they're about to learn from the galaxy's newest teachers. Orders went out across the Terran network, quiet but precise. Fleets reactivated, factories hummed to life beneath the oceans of Earth, and in the shadows of moons, the great shipyards opened again. Humanity was not afraid. They had rebuilt themselves for this moment. They had become the keepers of balance, the guardians of the peace they had earned through terror. As the fleets prepared, a single message was broadcast through the void, directed toward the unknown. "We ended one war to teach the stars respect. If you bring another, learn from them first." The signal vanished into the darkness beyond the galaxy, and humanity waited, patient as ever, their engines cold, their hearts steady. On the 7th night, as the Earth rotated beneath the calm starlight, Admiral Torres stood once more before her crew, her voice steady. "We are not conquerors," she said. "We are reminders. We are what patience becomes when tested, and as long as humanity stands, there will be order among the stars." The crew saluted, their faces lit by the glow of distant suns, and the Admiral turned back to the window, whispering almost to herself. "They thought our silence meant weakness, but it was always the sound of strength waiting to speak." And as the Terran fleets glided into the endless dark, the galaxy slept in peace once more, guarded by the quiet watchers who had taught it the most unforgettable lesson in history, that when humanity's patience ends, the universe listens.